Welcome to another tying session. I'm going to do a dragonfly for you guys. I haven't done anything on the channel for quite a while, but I'm going to tie a dragon that I've been tying. Well, I haven't tied it recently, but I tied it back in the 90s when I fished the Arnolaubscher area quite a lot, and even Tel Midlands and those areas. It's called the village dragon. Now it's a little bit different from many of the other dragons, or dragonfly nymphs rather. I'm tying it on the grip 13812 size 8. You can tie it anything from a size 4 to a size 10. I've already tied mono eyes in. You'll see I make them with quite thick mono, and I've tied those in, and I'm going to tie a very short tail at the back, and I'm using just the fluffy part of a strung saddle hackle. You can use marabou as well, it's not going to make much of a difference. And for the rib I'm going to tie a piece of copper wire in, not too thin copper wire, you want something a little bit more rigid. Tie that in, keep that at the back, and then the next step is the abdomen. Now this is where the big difference comes in from, between this fly and many of the other flies, other dragonfly nymphs. Now the abdomen needs to be built up with something. Normally, you can add a bit of lead in there and then cover it with a wool or a thick floss, or anything that will build it up quickly rather than just using a thread. Now I'm using a 3/0 grip thread, but I'm going to use something a little bit different for the abdomen, and for that I cover the hook shank with a bit of glue, and I take a piece of 2mm fly foam and I cut that about 2mm wide, and I tie that in the front. Now the reason for tying the abdomen with foam is to get a different effect on the fly when you fish it. And I normally fish this on either intermediate or a very slow sinking line. I personally prefer intermediate. I'm quite honest, to be quite honest, I hate sinking lines, but I prefer intermediate, and you can let it go down all the way in between the grass. Wrap the foam to the back. You need to create that shape of the dragonfly body. Add a bit more glue, just on the top is fine, just needs to hold it there, and then wrap back. And you can pull a little bit on the foam. Don't pull too hard. You don't want the foam to collapse, but you want a nice dragonfly abdomen shape, and you tie that off right there. Now you can cut that excess off. Now to get the shape right, you will need to make a few wraps of thread over the foam, just to get that shape right. Just pull it into the right shape, not too tight, and those wraps are, you need to manipulate it a little bit, and that normally at the back and in the front that you need to do that a bit, because you're going to be using dubbing and to cover the foam. You don't want those wraps to slip off or anything to make it difficult. So I try to shape it a little bit with a few wraps of thread, and then take the thread back. It's not very neat, but don't worry about that, we'll cover that with dubbing. Take your thread back, and we're going to use a grip flashy nymph dubbing. I'm going to do it in olive. You can tie it in brown, you can tie it in light olive. There's a very nice pale olive that I use sometimes as well. You can tie it in black. And then I'm going to make a dubbing loop. Now there are videos on dubbing, I'll post the links down below. You can follow them, and the one that you want to watch is the one on dubbing loops. And you can kind of have a look at the technique there. And important tool to have is a very good quality dubbing twister. I use one of CNF's dubbing twisters. It's probably the best I've ever used. And so when you fish this fly, you fish it very slow. You can let the intermediate line sink into the grass or right to the bottom actually, and you can then retrieve the fly. And because of the foam, the fly will not sink in onto the bottom. So especially when there's a bit of grass on the bottom, it's a very nice fly to fish just above the grass because you've got control over it. Much better control over this than what you'll have when you fish the fly with lead on a floating or intermediate line. So it's definitely a very successful fly to try. Now make that brush and you wrap the brush forward over the foam, not too tight, but you quite firm wraps. And if one brush is not going to be enough, you're going to have to make another one. So wrap as far as you can and then tie that off. And then you make another dubbing loop on the body there. Take your thread forward and repeat that process. You just wrap that around the abdomen to finish the abdomen. Now you can see it build up a very nice, very easy to build a abdomen with a foam, and it keeps a very nice shape or profile. It's close to the front. I'm going to tie that off right there because we're going to be tying some more materials on at this point right here. So I tie that off, and then what we're going to do is, before we wrap the copper wire, is to trim that dubbing. It's quite a hairy, coarse dubbing. We'll trim that dubbing away a bit, so you've got a slightly smoother finish on the abdomen. And then we're going to wrap the copper wire to create that rib. Open wraps. And there's another reason for using a thicker copper wire, which I'll show you just now. You tie that off at the bottom. Right there. Make sure you hide that end away, that copper wire, and you don't cut yourself or cut the thread. It can be very annoying. The reason for the copper wire is you can manipulate the body even more. So if you've got a rigid copper wire, quite a stiff, heavier copper wire, you can squash that body a little bit flatter with your thumb and forefinger. Then you've got that very nice coffin shape abdomen. Now the next step is to tie in the wing plate or the wing case, and for that I use pheasant tail. You can use turkey as well. I coat it with a bit of varnish so all the barbs stay together, and you tie that in right there behind the eyes. Now for legs, we're going to use I use the grip silly legs. There are many different types of legs that you can use. I tie one piece in on the one end. It's way too long. cut that away, and I tie another piece in on the other end. Like that. Now we'll deal with the legs a little bit more a little bit later. Cut that away, and now we're going to do another brush. Now this time we need to do one that we can pretty much finish the fly off with. So you're going to do kind of the same length brush, even though we're not going to cover that much ground with the brush. To make just one wrap over the back behind the eyes, and then put the dubbing twister aside. Hook it on somewhere, and now we're going to fold the wing pheasant tail to form that wing plate. Fold that forward. That one. And tie that off behind the eyes. Make sure that's tied in quite tight, and then trim that excess away. And now you can pull the legs in the front backwards a little bit and tie them to point backwards slightly on both sides. Take your thread forward. I'm going to take the dubbing brush, make a wrap between the legs, then behind the eyes and between the leg and in front of the legs. That will push the legs backwards nicely. And you're going to figure 8 over the eyes, like that, and you tie the fly off right at the bottom. Cut that away, pull the legs into position. Now you're not going to trim the dubbing on the head. You don't need to do that. You actually want that there to be a little bit hairy and bushy to just create a little bit more movement and imitate a little bit of leg movement. And you tie that fly off right there. Again, remember to leave some space to tie the fly off. I've seen it so many times where guys tie beautiful flies and they don't leave enough space to finish the fly off. And that is the village dragon. Please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, please comment, leave a comment. It's always nice to read the comments, and go and tie them and fish them, and let me know what you think. Pull the legs into position. You can cut the legs shorter if you want to, and that's the village dragon.